This will be the inaugural video in the Psychoanalytic Quarterly Substack series called Varieties of Transitional Experience. I am Nirav Soni, and I am here with Jefre Cantu-Ledesma and Ezra Feinberg. Thank you so much to the two of you for doing this and for agreeing to talk. Um, I wanted to start out with uh, one kind of bigger question that maybe might orient our conversation. Um, and that is, I guess I'm wondering, because our audience, the audience of the quarterly is of people who are interested in psychoanalysis. And one of the things that we do as psychoanalysts, and probably the biggest thing that we do, is we listen. Um, and so I guess I'm wondering about the ways in which um, both your kind of practices as kind of caretaking people, as Jeffrey is your work as a chaplain, and Ezra is your work as a psychologist and psychoanalyst. Um, that I'm wondering about the ways in which kind of the practice of um, taking care of people influences your way of approaching music, and also maybe the ways in which your approaches to music influence kind of the ways in which you listen to the people, um, who you are caring for.
Who's going first?
Hey there, Cantu.
The first thing that comes to mind is maybe not exactly where you were headed, but creativity as a process that I engage in, either as a chaplain or making music, the creative process, which includes a kind of deep listening, um, a full, what I would call almost like a full body listening rather than just like intellectual head listening. Um, and I try to approach whether I'm engaged in a creative process or like an explicitly creative process, like making music or ceramics or cooking, as we were talking about before, or sitting with someone who's grieving or dying or has a loved one who's dying. I think the request of both of those engagements is a kind of not stuckness, right? It's an ability to be able to respond to what's actually happening in the moment rather than some idea we have, which always is always there and can always be played with, but a sort of pliability, a responsiveness, a fluidity, like these are muscles and skills that we can develop that we can bring into all, relationships in life. And so if, just to take a really big, broad snapshot here, this kind of creative, dynamic, fluid, like responsiveness, I think is valuable whether I'm making music alone, working in collaboration with people, or I'm with someone who's dying, and there's absolutely no pat answer, to meet some of the deep suffering that we meet in our work. There is no pat answer really that we can just always rely on. So that is a request, I think, and a really a deep request and a requirement of a kind of creativity to just be available in the moment and respond to what's happening.
Yeah, I I like that framing. Um, I think the thing that I think process is definitely the word for me.
Uh-huh.
And um, what is I think one thing that's especially challenging about both healing work and, being a therapist and a psychoanalyst, and similarly, being a musician, being a composer, um, is the distance, often a vast and mainly unknowable distance between what Jeffrey just said, like what's happening in the moment,
Yeah.
and what you're quote unquote trying to do. Because, like, as we know as analysts, Nirav, like, um, the, you know, a patient comes in, has a set of, um, brings us a set of issues, conflicts, problems, points of struggle and pain and, you know, sadness, anxiety, whatever it might be. And a sort of a, a picture starts to form, over time, sometimes slowly, sometimes rather quickly, of where the issues are. And one thing, and like what needs attention. And we have all these kind of like ways of going about paying that attention and taking that care. Um, but often it requires forgetting about
Uh-huh.
this person changing, forgetting about this person, like not having either a very faint or not at all horizon of like what's supposed to happen with this person in their life, in their heart. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like what's way more important is what's alive in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in a weird way, I mean it's an awkward thing to compare, but it is in my own personal experience similar to making music, because if I think about I need to make a record, it's not that helpful. You know what I mean? I will think about that and I'm going to, but it doesn't that is much more the idea of finishing something and making it really good, is or even finishing something and making so that it's better than what it is now is not that helpful as much as it is like what's happening in the moment now with what I'm making, with what I'm playing, with what I'm composing, with what I'm messing around with you just see what I'm saying?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, I guess so. So what I'm hearing, I think for in with both of you, both of you, I think are talking about this kind of like sort of immersion in the kind of ongoing, developing sort of field of awareness in the moment and of being able to retain a kind of an attitude that is both kind of Jeffrey, the word use the words responsive and fluid and non-stuck, but also one that whereby you sort of forget about sort of, the outside context and kind of immerse yourself in the present. Um, I
Yeah,
guess
or
what
an
I'm
outcome context, or an outcome you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Process. Like you used the word process.
Right.
I guess what I'm wondering about for both of you is if you could if if both of you could tell me like some kind of specific like some moments that the two of you had, sort of in your like in your development and in not just early development, but I don't know, whatever, but like just times when you felt like this sort of like you got this, like, oh, actually this is like this is what it's about. Like particular moments when you felt like, oh, actually, I feel kind of like being alive to what is happening now is is the thing that is going to help this person, with the process of their dying or their passage to death, or a moment kind of earlier in your life where you felt like, kind of the moment slips by unless we kind of pay it this special kind of attention.
I feel like it's always the moments that are the most spontaneous, unexpected, and surprising. That like it's always like there's all this preparation that we do, and like I'm just thinking about on the in psychoanalyst world, like there's all this sort of speculation, like whoever said we read all this theory and all these and we learn all these techniques, and then we sort of come up with our own theories, and our own techniques, and that they're always sort of personal in some way. And that we go into the session armed with these things. And then every single time that anything really important, has happened, like between a patient and me, that I can look back on and point to and say, this was helpful. It was it was really unexpected. Like it's not something that I could have planned for. The preparation that I had, the technique, the theory, all that, I needed that. I definitely needed it, no question. But but it couldn't have it oriented me to something that was happening in the moment, but it couldn't have predicted it. That there was no the
Yeah.
that like I'm thinking about, you know, um a patient um, who insisted in after years of working together that um, I was not the therapist for her, and that psychoanalytic work was not the work that she needed. And the most important thing for me to do there was, and that she would, this became a trope, like it became something that she came back to all the time. And it that will really mess with your thinking, as we all know, because we want to give our patients the space, the leeway, the freedom to make their own decisions about whether or not they're in treatment. And we also need to be there for whatever is happening in a much deeper, a more unconscious, transferential way.
Hmm.
And um, I feel like I knew the pressure coming from her. This sounds a little bit like a almost like a like a typical or like not particularly notable um, scene, but the pressure coming from this particular patient around this was very heavy. And there was a moment where I had to decide whether I was going to engage with her in a real, quote unquote real way of like, well, maybe this isn't for you, or whether I was going to be with her like in this transference, which is definitely what it was. And I feel like ultimately there was um, a third piece of it, which is that she needed me to be in there struggling with her, surviving this onslaught. That it wasn't about whether or not I was going to make the right interpretation in terms of transference or take it as a concrete thing. Maybe you should find someone else with a different technique. But it was about the discomfort. It was about how it was about like not backing away
Hmm.
from her aggression and from the real actual impact that she was having on me, and for her to see that I could be there with that.
You
I
could
could
tolerate it,
I could tolerate it. I could tolerate.
Uh-huh.
and you didn't run away from it. So it gave her an example.
Yes, and interpreting it as transference would have been the same thing as taking it as
Right.
concrete. They both would have been running away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have
this
no idea what I said. It was some stumbly, terrible thing. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like it was whatever I said would have been embarrassing to know now because it wasn't about the words. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah. It's about the attitude. You're kind of like you're conveying a certain kind of receptiveness.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, in chaplaincy we call that a non-anxious presence,
Hmm.
and particularly in my work, going into a home that where maybe there's a number of people and everyone's dealing with grief in some sort of non-direct way, to walk into a space and just hold kind of stillness and a kind of stability can be really helpful because it sort of becomes a kind of gravity that people can rest. Um, but just to go back to your original question, I think more than any one particular moment, and this is just me and in particular, is that and Ezra talked about that. I'm sorry for I'm getting email. Um, we have our training and chaplaincy training. We do a lot of case studies, right?
Uh-huh.
I did my training at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan, and you would go out, you would meet, you would write about it, you'd bring back a verbatim, and then the whole group and the supervisor would work on it together. In these moments, this is when I would learn that like the pat answer is not going to work at all. Going into 100 hospital rooms, and not knowing what's on the other side of the door, whether it's a mother whose child has just died or someone who had a heart attack and they're so grateful to be alive, or what I mean, you just have no idea. And to be fixed with some sort of the right words or the perfect prayer or whatever. It's just, I mean, all of us have bullshit detectors, and people feel
Mhm.
that. I feel it, the person feels it. And now as a hospice chaplain, I go into people's homes and I don't know what's going on the other side of that door. And just doing this for years, hundreds of homes again, again, that becomes the lesson for me, the real big lesson of creativity, responding to what's arising,
Uh-huh.
not having some fixed idea of how, like I've I guess it's kind of a bit of a humility too. I don't assume that either have the right I'm the right person for this family, that I can be helpful, that I can take away their grief, which would be totally inappropriate, and I think going into a place and knowing, and this is sort of like what Ezra was saying, that there's no horizon. I'm not there to fix anything. I'm not there to take anything away. I'm just there to walk alongside, to really meet what's happening without flinching, not turning away.
Mhm.
And this has been the teacher for me, really. And then also my own, both my own Zen teachers and the people that I trained with as a chaplain who just modeled this for me. That, life is this fluid, explosive, dynamic thing that we just don't know what's coming. And I think to provide a space for people where you say, that's okay. It's okay. Whatever's arising now is okay. We're gonna survive. Um,
Y-
but that took years. It took years, and it wasn't one big thing. It was thousands of meetings
Uh-huh.
again and again and being like, Jeffrey, don't be stuck. You can't have an idea about what's even, I don't know what is going to be helpful. None of us know what is actually going to help somebody. And to assume that we do is just bullshit, I think. And also could be harmful. We could have some ideas and make some suggestions, but we don't know what someone's path is or what we really will penetrate into their heart.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. Both, I mean, Jeffrey, I think what, you and Ezra are talking about sort of in different ways. I mean, I think that, what you were just talking about was kind of came about through, as you're describing, these kind of years of thinking about these kind of years of practice and years of hundreds of experiences. You're saying that you kind of build it up in almost like kind of muscle, like body, like a sort of like bodily form of knowing something. And that, Ezra, I think you're describing an experience of sort of sort of neither kind of like holding nor folding in this kind of like very kind of difficult moment in being sort of like not telling someone what it is, but sort of figuring out this moment as it's happening between the two of you, as there are lots of kind of strong and difficult feelings. And I think what's so interesting about your both of your characterizations is is the kind of sort of I think the sort of paradox of kind of um uh both integrity, kind of personal integrity of kind of like um integrity in the sense of integration of like being yourself in a moment, but also of like not of being open to what's happening and to sort of to be yourself, but be yourself in a way that's not kind of arrogant or dogmatic or like feeling like you have the answer, and a feeling that you kind of like of that you can be receptive to a particular kind of moment.
For
Uh,
sure. And the like one thing is like the that it's still hard for me. That is still hard. It's still a challenge to not to like to think in terms not in terms like to think only in terms of what's happening in the moment and not in terms of like what am I doing and are we doing something and is something getting done? Have we
yeah.
found have we like have we am I giving the patient their money's worth? You know what I mean? Their time's worth. Like
Hmm.
am I like are we have I shown myself to be like a kind of have I done like a good enough dance here? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like fortunately that awareness kicks in quickly and I'm able to regulate it and to check myself. But I do still find it hard to just be here with someone without an idea of like, okay, how's it going with their struggle to find a relationship after so many years and they're so like is this progressing in any way and is there something that I should be saying that addresses this very big very difficult thing that actually is on its own time completely that may or may not be affected by our work together but they say this is something that they're struggling with, therefore I'm tasked with making it better or in some way. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. 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 And I guess I'm wondering how this works in music too, especially kind of in collaborative settings. Like, how do you kind of create this balance of like kind of lending your voice to the process, lending your voice to a kind of thing that's emerging as it's happening. I guess I'm thinking a little bit more about like, like collective improvisational contexts or something like that. Like, how do you balance kind of bringing your voice to it, but also being one voice in a group and in a group that's happening? And I imagine that's like pretty different and kind of recorded and um, kind of like something where there's some multi-tracking thing going on versus like a kind of like spontaneous context. Like I'm wondering if that's something that feels different in music than it is in clinical work, or whether you feel that actually there's a sort of like, that actually part of it is that like you're you, but you sort of let that you kind of find a way to let that you go in a way that like responds to others.
I mean, I think for me at least, one of the most interesting things about collaborating and why I'm always drawn towards it is that something emerges that I could not have imagined. But for that to happen, I actually have to all of us sort of have to let go in a way. And
Uh-huh.
and also at the same time, it's a bit of a contradiction. You have to also be rooted in your own self in a way either. So much so that um, your voice begins to come out in the whole thing rather than you, like it's easy in improvisation sometimes to get really confused, but if you can just be grounded in what you're doing and sort of develop a kind of faith
Uh-huh.
over time that your voice in this collective will create I the way I've been imagining it lately is that the music it is there's a it's like a sentient being in a way that
Uh-huh.
we're creating a space that it's born in, and then uh I always do this. It's like, what is like, particularly with recorded music when I'm trying to figure out what's next, it's like, okay, well, what does this song want? Like try to
Uh-huh.
give it its own subjectivity and like kind of listen and see like what this song wants, where does it want to go, And I love playing that way and just allowing the music to become its own, it has its own intention, it has its own uh feeling and dreams. It has its own dreams, and
Uh-huh.
I'm and the other musicians are part of that, right? We're part of what's being dreamed by this music, and um, I'm continually just, I do sort of like what Ezra was saying is like, right now I'm getting ready to go to the studio next month. I'm just racking my brain, figuring out what I'm going to do. I'm writing things down, writing ideas for other people and stuff. And that gives me a sense of preparedness, that I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
waste my time. I have very little time. These other people are donating their time to
Yeah,
me.
or their time.
Yeah, their time as well. They're busy, they're parents and have jobs or travel, playing music, whatever the case may be. So there's a pressure, but then at the same time, I know at some moment that all has to be given up and I have to listen deeply where the music's going and just let it go and just see. I have an idea of what I would like it to sound like. But again and again, when I collaborate with people, the music that comes out is often a surprise. It's like often a really deep surprise. And that's gratifying. That's edifying, makes me want to keep doing it. It's so much more interesting than what I think of. It's like
Uh-huh.
so much more interesting. Yeah,
Always. I agree. I mean, I think I even find that by myself. I mean, because
yeah,
I do so much work on my own,
same. Yeah,
and I will, the best moments are the ones that are total surprises. It happened just last night. I was messing around. It was funny. Like I last night seemed to be like going in a positive direction for the potential for me to go down to the basement and work on music in my studio after the kids went to bed. And then
Nice.
Rafa, my son, was was just not it was he's 8. He just was like not wanting to get in bed just yet. It had been a weekend, whatever. And he and I have been messing around in the studio together, the two of us. He
Whoa.
came down and he said, "Dada, let's go downstairs." And I said, "All right, cool, let's do it." So we went down, and whenever we're messing around, we basically just mess around with like percussion, like electronic percussion, like a Roland 808 plug-in, and we just like start making beats and making loops, and he does all kinds of funny things and like just wants to play with sound and noise. Like it's there have been some times when I've been like, "Let's learn this thing," and he's like, "I don't want to do that at all."
Ah,
Like he's totally not interested in learning music, but of course he is doing what we're doing. And and he's always I mean, I said working with him, it's not really work, but like playing with him,
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
all kinds of funny new sounds that I haven't discovered, like, in various plugins or whatever, like on the computer, they come up, and I think, that I wouldn't have found. I just wouldn't have gotten there if I hadn't been sitting there with him.
Uh-huh.
What's that? And I was like, I don't know. And then he just does it. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, and,
Uh-huh.
like,
That's
and then I'm
great.
like, I'm gonna remember that for later, like, and so then he eventually did go off to bed, and then I was down there just me, and I like took all the sounds that had found
Wow.
basically,
Wow.
and like started messing with them, and all these interesting things started coming out.
We need people to shake us out of our sort of repetitive comfort zones, in any
Uh-huh.
kind of, in life in general. We need those sort of elbows now and again to kind of pop us out, and I think if we're open, something new emerges that is interesting.
I think also like it is it may seem trite to like reference the Beatles, but I really was quite taken with in Get Back, the documentary of them making Let It Be and those last couple of records, just how completely like non-focused they were.
Huh. Huh.
Having
They,
fun.
they were
Uh-huh.
just playing. It was, did you see it, Nirav?
No, I didn't see it.
You
I didn't
have
see
to
it.
see it. It's incredible.
It's interesting for this very
Yes,
point. And
very.
you think that like a 5 hour
Interesting.
documentary or whatever it is, you'll be like so bored, but just watching them like as creative people in a room, it's pretty amazing.
All they do is mess around.
They
Huh.
just acting silly for hours,
85% of it is a joke. Like it's just, or not a joke, but just them
having
having
fun.
pure fun.
Uh-huh.
And then
Oh,
eventually they hit on something, and then they start, and then a process starts to take place that looks a little more like composite, like group composition. But even
uh-huh.
that's kind of fun. You know what I mean? And like there's so the ratio of like just messing around to like getting down to work is like 9 to 1.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I imagine that their lives at those moments were like pretty hard. Like there's probably a lot going on for them then
Yeah,
outside of the studio. And I could
Sure.
imagine that sort of like being like, a place where they're sort of like where this is what they're thinking about and this is like, this is what they were supposed to do was a relief. And it became maybe a little bit of like a
Totally.
playground for them.
yeah, that's such a
You
great
get
point.
that feeling that they're kind of blowing off steam, actually, in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
But you also get the feeling that this is what they do, and this is always what they did is just like get together, sit in a circle, and like mess around.
Yeah.
And I think that was a huge thing for me just to see that and to be like, because you think of, of like all of the heroes and the idols as being like geniuses who just are like whose focus was completely fixed
Uh-huh.
when in fact it was the opposite. It's just a kind of diffuse play that eventually
Uh,
rolls into something.
yeah. I
And
mean,
when you see Paul pull Get Back out of thin air, literally, you watch him just start playing
That's
the
a
bass
wild
and
moment.
pulls it out of thin air. And to me, it's like, yeah, you could say like he's a genius or whatever, but he's not. He's in a context, right? He's in that room recording, he's with
uh-huh.
his friends. Like there's all these elements that are sort of erased or invisible that support someone actually coming up with um, a piece of music,
Right.
and then we, of course, in our individualistic culture, we're like, oh, that person's an amazing songwriter, which, yes, people are really good at songwriting or whatever, but there is a whole system that someone's emerging out of,
Yeah.
and a field, a history of play and work, and just to get to the point where they can, yeah, pick up a bass and write a song really quickly,
And collectivity,
yeah, and collectivity. Yeah, I guess that's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to point
Yeah,
togetherness,
yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
togetherness.
like what if he had been Paul McCartney had just been on his own, then would have come up with those songs?
Right.
Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of like the shared history too. That it's kind of like that. The sort of like Jeffrey, as you were saying, that it's like that kind of like what does the moment need? Like the like that that kind of like his coming up with the riffs or whatever that kind of thing. That in the moment, it's like he is giving this. He's kind of giving the moment what it needs and giving the group what they need, kind of out of their sort of shared history collaboration. That it's sort of like that it's sort of emerging that it seems spontaneously but that it's like the sort of product of a number of interactions that have been going on for a while and that they've been developing.
and
Um,
the healing relationship is the same, I
yeah,
think. And
yeah,
so I think those of us who are tasked with providing space for others, I think it's helpful to remember that we're in a larger context. We're not the one with the magic wand that's coming into the space and fixing things so much, as much as we're a participant. And in my job as a chaplain, yeah, I also have to recognize the power that I have too when I walk into a
hmm
space, particularly if it's a space where people are very religious. So there's that dance between using my power in a way that's supportive for people, and also recognizing this is a big context and there's a history here that I'm just dropping into for a moment, a day, a week, a few months, whatever the case may be. And that sort
yeah,
of can help to soften the edges of needing to think that like I'm here to fix or I'm here to improve or I'm here to change, you know?
or
Yeah.
heal everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think Jeffrey that you're like that, I think that I mean, therapists I think feel a similar way that like there's something kind of special about the first few meetings you have with a person or like something kind of there's like a sort of special thing for that. And I think that kind of like it's just sort of just what you're saying that you're entering a sort of situation in which there are a lot of fields or a lot of things that are elements that are work happening and that you have a kind of ability to bring something sort of subtle and new that can kind of exert a sort of shaping influence, not a kind of like redefining, but a sort of reshaping the things that are happening in such a way that like something that might have been blocked can kind of like can open up and change.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's a really beautiful way of putting it, I think. And also that we're not privy to all the elements that are at play, either.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sometimes I find out after someone's passed away, and I speak to another family member, and all this family history is revealed that that person never shared with me because of,
Uh-huh.
shame or fear or whatever, and it's like, oh, now I understand why that person was acting that way to this other family member, it's like, and I was oblivious to it, maybe.
Absolutely. There's a great story that about I think Frida Fromm Reichmann when she was at Chestnut Lodge. And there was I think that this was sort of shortly after the Second World War. And, she was a sort of German expatriate, German or Austrian? German, um, who, was like here working in English in a way that was unusual for her. And there was someone who was a vet from the Second World War who came in who had felt very ashamed about his conduct in the war. And he came in and he was saying like, I'm yellow, I'm just such a yellow-bellied guy. And she came in being a German speaker. She thought that he was talking about being jaundiced. So she came in and she just sort of looked at him dead in the eye and said, "You are not yellow." And he calmed down. Right?
Whoa.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's like I think it's something we don't need to understand. It's not about like understanding what's happening. It's about that kind of thing, like like being able to reshape a situation that you may not understand or
Mhm.
comprehend.
Beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, that's powerful.
One thing, this came up earlier, I just want to bring us back a little bit, and this is just a point, we don't have to talk about this, but maybe it's my own hobby horse. But when Ezra was talking earlier about the horizon and not having the horizon, but then always being in the struggle of like, am I doing,
Uh-huh.
healing and has been so captured by the market, that I think actually providing a space for someone where you're not trying to change them, you're not trying to fix them, and you're not on a timeline. I mean, obviously, um, you're on a relative timeline, but I think that can be felt and actually opens the space up even more. And also, I think it actually is a way that we can kind of counter these market pressures that are like,
Yeah.
fixing should look like X, and I have this in chaplaincy as well, that after visits, we have to fill out these, what kind of interventions did I do? And,
Hmm.
and it's so coarse in a way, it's trying to capture. I'm not totally saying that we can't talk about interventions and talk about, how we deal with suicidal ideation or whatever the case may be. But
Hmm.
at the same time, it seems to undercut the kind of mystery of just being an open-hearted presence for someone. And of course, we're just in this pressure all the time to do, to create, to make ourselves justified, right? That we need, our value needs to be justified as people.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so I think even if it's just this subtle way, meeting someone open-heartedly and without a clock in a way, and without needing to fix them is just such a blessing. It's such a gift. in our in this particular stage of human development that we find ourselves in, which is so
Sure.
crushing. It's so crushing. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that there are all these. I think like Jeffrey. I think it's like we're like I think we're trying to give people an experience of being heard and of
Yeah.
being like listened to, and then we can kind of all of these sort of subtle things start to happen. These kind of like little interactions whereby they start to sort of feel in touch with us, and we start to feel in touch with
Mm.
them, and that they kind of get to know us, and and then sort of like something that they didn't know comes up or something that we didn't know comes up, and then there are all
Yeah.
these sort of subtle transactions that all of a sudden kind of like emerge, like Ezra, like that story you were telling between you and that patient, where all of a sudden it's like I imagine that that came about because a lot of things had happened and probably a lot of trust had developed between you and this person so that she could say this and also be open to you to hearing what you had to say at that moment.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's I think that that thing is experienced by the patient and the clinician, both. Like the patient saying, am I, is this working? Is something that I've heard so many
Mhm.
times. And I
Mhm.
think that there's a sort of there's a kind of market driven aspect to that too. Not even, it isn't necessarily asked in the context of like, am I getting my money's worth? But more just like, are we doing that thing where like I come to get healed and then I'm healed and I'm better and I can go and like get back on track. And it's interesting how um, when people do heal, when things do get better, it looks nothing like that.
Ah,
It
uh,
just looks nothing like it. It looks like things starting to change in their life in a way that is um, sort of non-directed. Like that patient who I was sharing about earlier, like she has a really good relationship now, after decades without one. It just happened. It didn't happen because I coached her into like how to use a dating app or something. You know what I mean? Or even like it didn't even happen through like some kind of exhaustive exploration into all of her prior romantic relationships. We certainly have talked about that, you know what I mean? Along with lots of other things. But like it wasn't worked on. You know what I mean? It wasn't like the focus of things. The focus of things was session to session.
yeah,
Where are we? What's happening? And like being with that. And and then, and then these things start to change. And it's something that's really hard to like describe out in the world to like people who don't do this stuff because they're like, it makes it sound like it's magic or something or
It
like,
is
well, it
magic.
is. I was actually, yes,
It
no, I
actually
love
is
that. Yes,
magic.
I
It's
right,
because
agree.
it's an absolute mystery. It's
right,
an
right.
absolute mystery why things fall into place, why we heal, why, and our conceptual mind wants to put these things into linear, well, I did this and it's not, that's not it. Just like the creative process,
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
think the creative process, whether we're whatever context, we're stepping into a mysterious field
yeah,
in which we are, we have a little slice of what's happening, but then the wholeness is like this mysterious context that's just churning,
Yeah,
and then we make a conscious decision, right, to swim in it, and then that churns it in a different way. And I
yeah.
think if we swim in it with some intentionality and some presence and kindness and patience, then that has an effect. Everything we do has an effect.
It's funny though, because in the world of psychoanalysis, maybe unlike in Buddhism, like saying it's magic is not going to get you that far.
Well, hey, well,
It's
yeah, yeah.
not like it's not no because
Well, it's
actually
not going to get you very far in Buddhism either, Ezra. But at some point you realize the mystery of life,
right,
that things are not A, B, C, D, and cause and effect is not as simple as billiard balls on a
Yeah.
table.
totally.
That there's just a vast mystery that we actually don't have, at least consciously, full access to. And things happen, shifts happen, change happens in relationship. Why? You know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
although I think billiards is a great example because you don't know what's going to happen, you know? Like you kind of like, you know, you hit the balls, who knows what way they're going to go? Like you
Right.
can't predict it either. I think, you know, that science and magic are like somehow entirely unrelated to each other is I think is an effect of marketing. Not so
right.
much an effect of how things are. I think that
That's
like
true.
science is quite magical. Like I think that or that science can too be filled with wonder in the way that
Right.
magic, I think, encourage
Oh,
or sort of
definitely.
inclines us towards wonder.
Yes,
Definitely.
Um,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
and that you
That's
need both. You need discipline when it comes to magic, and you need openness when it comes to science.
Right.
well, you also need training in if you're going to walk alongside people in their suffering.
Yes.
You need
Yes.
training. And that requires a kind um, of using the conceptual mind to think about new conceptual frameworks, to think about new ways of entering into relationship, and then hopefully doing our own work, we're able
Hmm.
to, open up into the mystery of like, okay, all these things are really, it's like cooking. Like I made dal last night, and Diana, my partner, was like, it's so nice that you could just make dal. And I was like, right, because I've made it 10,000 times.
Yep.
Because we were so exhausted. We just come back from New York City. But after making doll for, 15 years, like I can just look around, okay, I make some doll real quick. And 20 minutes later we had
Hmm.
doll. And but that takes making doll 1,000 times to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, I don't know why I went into the
No, that
doll.
makes sense because I think it's about like finding your position, you know,
Yeah.
like and having a certain a certain comfort in your position, I think goes a long way for another person.
Yeah, I think the rabbi that I trained with when I was becoming a chaplain, she asked me once, this is, there's like three nuggets that she taught me, like that, we remember these, right, from our
Yeah.
mentors, right?
Hmm.
This is one of them. And she was like, if a religious, because I was really struggling with like I wasn't a priest at the time, but like, walking everyone, I say chaplain, they assume I'm Christian immediately. And I was just really struggling. I have real deep aversion to that, and it just wasn't integrated yet. And she's like, well, if a religious person, let's say if they were Buddhist or whatever, walked into the room, what would you want them to be? And I really sat and let it sit, that question, and I said authentic. I'd want them to be authentic, and I think that can take time. I think it can take time to really stand in our own 2 feet, not be swayed around by everyone else's ideas about who we should or shouldn't be or whatever, and that kind of groundedness is, yeah, like what was the word you used, Ezra? Like we know who we are, kind of,
Yeah, position.
yeah, our position, exactly. And so
Hmm.
as a chaplain now, I have to, some people, for some people it means a lot, and if I don't take care of that, I could probably maybe do some harm, if
Yeah.
I walk into the space and I'm not recognizing that for them this role of a spiritual authority, right,
Hmm.
is can be used in a helpful way, in a
Mhm.
supportive way for them, even if that's not how I think about myself.
Right, right.
So it's like dancing between their projection on me and then sort of what's that martial art where you move someone else's energy.
Judo.
Yeah,
Judo.
yeah, doing the judo of like, okay,
Yeah,
I can take that on and I can actually support you.
yeah,
You find saying Hail Mary supportive. Okay, that's not my tradition. You would like to read the Psalms. Okay, that's not my tradition, but yes, let's do that. And then I'll say a prayer for us.
right.
Yeah. I think that our authority, um, uh, that it provide. I think that it's like authority, like when it's the seat of dogmatism, it's like then then it's what we don't want. But
Right.
like when authority or a title, like you're saying, like priest, when it names and when it gives shape into someone of what our training is, like this is who we are. We know, we have studied these texts. We have, like, it's in our bones. We care about this. That's what it means to be a priest. I
Right.
think that, like, that means something. Like for me, like what it, like, to be a psychologist, to be a psychoanalyst, it means I I have absorbed this. I have thought about this, spent a lot of time thinking. And so when we're and so this kind of, you know, that what we are doing becomes a process because of your trust in kind of my capacity to hear what you're saying in this meaningful way.
Mm.
And that just kind of like, it's like it, like um it turns it makes dal out of lentils, right? It, like, it's like it takes all these individual things and it makes it like a kind of like a specific thing that you can taste and compare to other versions. Ah, the dal's a little thin this week. I should have, like, yeah, right, like,
I like that. Yeah.
right, then it's like you give it and you the name transforms what it is, and it transforms a person's experience of it, even though you're kind of like, you what you're doing might be different under it, might be considered something, I don't know, just ordinary under a different description.
Right.
Yeah, and
Uh,
also I think the being a priest is like an archetype, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I have to take care of that, right? That like no matter if we're religious or not, like it is like this deep human archetype of like
Yeah.
having like a spiritual person in the community that's some kind of authority or is supportive or whatever, however we think about that. Yeah, so it's like taking that on, dancing with it for a moment, and then I come home and I'm with my kid, and I'm like playing music with my friends or whatever.
yeah. I think the authority piece is can get in the way of the authentic piece.
Mhm.
It can. Yeah, it certainly can. Yeah.
Certainly. I think people
I think
start
the
off with the authority piece. People start with that.
right,
They get out of their training and they're like, da da da. But it
right,
takes a
right.
while to actually really be with
Totally.
people to become
Yeah,
the authentic one. Yeah.
right. I think there are a lot. I especially like I don't want to I don't want to name names and I won't. But I know some people really are like high on their own supply of authority. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I know these
and
names.
and and it's and it can be seductive. It can be seductive if, especially because there's something exciting about being an authority. There's something narcissistically gratifying about it. About
Sounds like some people in power that come to mind when you say
yeah, sure,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, well, yeah. Oh
That's
God.
there are extreme ends of it too, to the point of abuse. But even before getting to that, it can just be like it can just, sort of distort the channel of connection, of and um you don't really teach you that. No one ever said that to me. No one has ever said that. People have led by example. Good supervisors, good teachers have
Hmm.
led that by example. I can think of many, thankfully.
Including maybe the one who gave the title to recumbent speech.
Sure. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, maybe
Jeffrey, Ezra and I both had the same supervisor in analytic
have,
training. Have, oh, you still have, yeah.
have.
And he's someone I think who is beloved to both of us, and I think
okay.
really embodies this attitude.
And he let me rip off his title. Most important, most importantly, I don't even know. I've told him that. I don't know if he's entirely with it, but
You should give him a copy of the record. He's like, actually, so uh this person's name is Nate Kravis, and he comes to Princeton pretty often, and like we go and hang out at the Princeton Record Exchange.
oh, do you really? Oh,
Yeah.
I- every time he and I work together, because I only see him once a month, I'm like, I'm like, okay, getting down, like that, talk about focus,
Uh-huh.
like I'm like, I have 45
Brass
minutes.
tacks immediately.
Yeah,
Oh
like I
yeah.
have 45 minutes with my guru. Let's get to
Hmm.
it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
right.
And like, and so we never talk about anything else, but we probably should, and maybe that would be
You
helpful.
should. I mean,
Yeah.
Nate knows so much.
To this point, a couple of years ago, I went down to my alma mater, Union Theological, and they had a roundtable discussion with graduates who had actually moved out into the field and become chaplains, and so in the program that I was in, Buddhism and interreligious engagement, the students got together and like, let's invite, a bunch of these people back. And someone asked me a question, which I can't remember the question was, but I said that, you know, we do in chaplaincy, we do what's called clinical pastoral education, which usually you do, I don't know. I did a 1 year residency plus like 2 years while I was in graduate school a little bit. So it's a lot. It's a lot to do. And somebody asked me a question and I just remember my answer being like, you are not a chaplain when you finish clinical pastoral education. And
Uh-huh.
I mean, you could hear the audible gasps. And it's like you may have the hours under your belt and you may have the Master's of Divinity degree, but you are not a chaplain. It takes years. It takes really years to, as you were saying, Ezra, to kind of um, find your authenticity. You have the authority,
Right.
right? You have the authority to get a job. Someone will actually hire you if they like you. They
Mhm.
will hire you now because you have the credentials, but you don't have the authenticity that unless you've this might come out sounding wrong, unless there were people that I was training with who this was their second career. They'd gone through
Mhm.
a divorce, they'd lost a child. Like those people were often the ones that were like, they were ready.
Uh-huh.
They'd suffered enough, but it was like the undergrads who had just gone through grad school right away, got
Uh-huh.
the CPE training, and then it was like, no. No, it's going to take time. You're
Yeah.
really going to have to be with people in their suffering, and you're really going to have to see that your pat answers fall flat, and
Yeah.
and people will let you know, and that slowly wears down the authority and hopefully amps up the authenticity,
Yeah, there's something interesting. So I do a lot of I supervise psychology interns who are like
Mhm.
very new to doing psychodynamic psychotherapy, and I really love it because they are very much learning and
Mhm.
very much at the beginning, and so there's a way in which they're also very, very open. And so what I think that they might lack in either what they might lack in terms of not just authority, but in terms of this kind of like having it in your bones quality.
Mhm.
They have it in there is instead this, like you described, kind of walking alongside
Mhm.
their patients. And I feel like my job with them is to kind of help them in that and help them learn along the way and
Mhm.
to not try to know too much too quickly, but to sort of be open and learn with them. And I sometimes wonder whether their patients might do better with them when they're doing well than they might do with someone more senior
Right.
because
Mhm.
they know someone's like really listening and
Mhm.
really trying.
Trying, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that there's something I think about that kind of like it's like we're going through it alongside them, but we're having a process.
Yeah.
And we're like kind of, using our own experience too. And I think that there is something sort of special in that trainee
Mm.
experience about like this sort of like just seeing this for the first time kind of like Ezra, like you were saying with Rafa, like
Yeah.
Rafa kind of like pushing all the buttons and stuff like
Right.
that, and
Yeah.
sort of like doing all this stuff. And I
The
think that like
enthusiasm.
Right.
the enthusiasm and to sort of like I think that in our positions as people who are a little farther on to kind of support and scaffold for those people their own experiences of
Yeah.
Right.
doing it.
Right.
I wonder also if in our fields, one of the things that might be a little different too is that my contact with like really acute suffering in the moment, like walking into the room when with the mom who's about to learn that her child has died, like
That,
and being
yes.
right there. And that kind of the intensity of that is, I mean, I just think about some of the training, how I responded to those situations when I was a trainee,
Mm,
and I was just like, oh,
I think
I
about
just
that too.
wasn't there. I just
Uh,
wasn't there. I wasn't able to be there. And of course, that's where I was. That was my path, and that was part of
uh,
how I learned. But so I wish my supervisor was there for that family and that. And of course, I don't know. I don't know what impact I had on, if a family, maybe they were like, oh, that chaplain was there and that was really helpful. But yeah,
I
I don't
feel
know why that came to mind, but in particularly in hospital chaplaincy, you really can be in these situations with
sure.
like, no, your dad is dead. Like he just came in with a heart attack and like he's gone, and you're like right there and have to, or the parent, like, I'm sorry, your daughter's dead, and you're like right there and have to respond to this like explosion of grief. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is something that's very, I think that's very different because I think by the time that, and I think that for Ezra and I think that maybe it's kind of the opposite problem that people have gone so far from the moment
right.
that and
Right.
it's the defenses that they've built up in the
The
meantime.
layers of it. Yeah. Right.
And so like we're trying to, in a way, we're sort of trying to get
Back.
back.
Yes.
So they
Very
don't feel so alone in that acute moment. Oh, that's so be this would be a great conversation. We should have like a chaplaincy psychotherapy, and talk about these sort of
Yeah.
differences and
totally.
similarities and yeah, approaches.